Anyway, we are rambling now. Matthew chapter 16. My last Sunday here, we looked at the Syrophoenician woman, right? The woman up at Tyre with the daughter who was ill, demon possessed, right? And she says, "Hey, even the dogs eat the crumbs from the master's table." And then I was gone for a week, and I didn't go back and find out how far y'all got in that week that I was gone. So now y'all have to fill me in. What's that? All the way through the chapter? Maybe so. So that week I was gone, y'all should have started at verse 29. And this is, this confession time, right? I didn't go back and listen to it. Quite honestly, because I thought about it late. I've got notes in there, and I looked them over, and okay, great, we can handle this. And then I was realizing, just this morning actually, was realizing that oh yeah, I got good notes, I'm ready to go, yada, 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 but I don't know where I'm starting. So somebody tell me where I'm starting. Am I starting at verse 29? Am I starting at verse 32? Am I jumping to the next chapter? Who remembers? Who took that Sunday? What's that? What's that? Yeah, well, Matthew 15. Sorry, did I say 16 earlier? We were in 15:29. Okay, well, that means you didn't do anything the week I was gone. Okay, we're going to start at 29. Departing from there, chapter 15 of Matthew, verse 29. Departing from there being Tyre, departing from there, Jesus went along by the Sea of Galilee, and had gone up to the mountain. He was sitting there. Large crowds came to him, bringing with them those who were lame, crippled, blind, mute, and many others. And they laid them down at his feet, and he healed them. So the crowd marveled as they saw the mute speaking, the crippled restored, and the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they glorified the God of Israel. What's that? You're at 32. Okay, so you got through glorifying the God of Israel by when everybody brought them up and sat them down. Awesome. Okay, verse 32. And Jesus called his disciples to him, and he said, "I feel compassion for the people, because they have remained with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I do not want to send them away hungry, for they might faint on the way." The disciples said to him, "Where would we get so many loaves in this desolate place to satisfy such a large crowd?" And Jesus said to them, "How many loaves do you have?" And they said, 7, and a small fish. Yes, a few small fish. Whee! Verse 35. And he directed the people to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and giving thanks, he broke them and started giving them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 7 large baskets full. And those who ate were 4,000 men, besides women and children. And sending away the crowds, Jesus got into the boat and came to the region of Magadan. Okay, what do you got? What's jumping out of there at you?
So it kind of strikes me, that part where it says that they had already been with him for 3 days. It makes me wonder, did everybody have food for that entire 3 days and they just then run out? Or had they been following him around like, deadheads followed Jerry Garcia and just kind of hanging out, didn't have any food? Yeah, I don't know. It's just something to wonder. Nothing theological there.
I had similar questions, right? Did they plan for a couple days and this thing's just keeping going and going and going, and hey, we're gonna hang out and still do this, and they've recently run out, or have they been going without for 3 days now? And I'm trying to, I was turning over the logistics of the rest of this. You got 4,000 people camped out in the hills here. As a guy who occasionally has to do logistics for groups, I'm like, that's a pain in the neck. There are a whole bunch of things that we would have to make happen now in order for all of these people to come out and do this. That there are some unanswered questions in there. All of it leads us to the same place, that we don't have what we need. Once again, the disciples are standing there going, now what? And once again, Jesus does what? Yeah, he provides. And before he provides, he has compassion. Jesus takes a look at the situation, and the situation is humanly bleak, which is usually what happens when I try to make stuff happen on my own. It is humanly bleak.
Well, if we're looking at it in only this context, I know this story shows up in other scriptures, but when you think about it, obviously for 3 days they were being fed, at least spiritually.
Absolutely,
They
being fed
clearly
spiritually.
did not need.
Right?
They did not want to leave.
You can make it a while.
They did not want to leave to go get food. They had the water there from the lake, Galilee, the Sea Galilee there, which I don't know if is it salty or is it fresh. I have no idea.
It's fresh water.
But they clearly, Jesus would have sensed that they were getting very hungry, and he knew that they were going to need that food. But
He might be getting hungry.
up until that point, he's feeding them spiritually, and they haven't expressed their need for physical food at that point. So I'm thinking, up until here, they haven't needed it, really.
So he, the active ministry perhaps has sort of superseded the need. Is that a fair way to put it? Maybe. There are enough other things going on and enough other provision, spiritual provision, that the physical hasn't become an issue yet. Perhaps. What's that? Okay, they could have foraged something. They may have had something with them. Yeah, there's any number of things.
In the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah. The point is here that that Jesus has compassion. Right? That he sees need, and then frankly he addresses it. He turns to the disciples and says, "Hey, what are we going to do about this? Because I have this deep feeling about the needs of these people, which, oh, by the way, disciples, you probably should have as well, right? We need to do something for them." And left largely where he was. What was that? Chapter 12? Is that where No, it was just back in chapter 14. So just last chapter that he fed the 5,000. Right? They've seen this. What you got, Dave?
I see he says, I will not send them away fasting lest they faint. That's a sign that something great going to happen to me, and because he hadn't told them yet how many fish they had or asked him or whatever, but he's saying, I will not send them away. So if, and like us, probably so many times we miss these signs that something's great about to happen. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah. So there's some. In what translation are you reading? King James. So King James says, "I will not send them." So New American Standard said, "I do not want to send them away." You're absolutely right, Dave. If it's will not, right? That's a much stronger statement. And I like it. I don't know. We have to get into the Greek and see how that stacks up, right? But Old King James says, "I will not send them away hungry." Right? Like he's made a decision already. And even if he says, even if we go with the NAS and I do not want to send them away hungry, I think you're right? He knows what he's going to do. Jesus has a plan long before this. He knows how this is going to work out. So the details are a little different, right? We got 7 loaves of bread instead of 5 this time, and an undisclosed number of fish. And we only pick up 7 baskets full this time, and 4,000 men besides women and children. But beyond that, it's a very similar event to the feeding of the 5,000, right? Jesus says, "Hey, bring me the chow, right? Bring me the stuff." He directs everybody to sit down, verse 35. He gives thanks, he breaks them, and he starts giving them to the disciples. And the disciples do the same thing they did last time. Right? Pack the basket down here, serve the food, pack the empty basket back to Jesus. We just did this last chapter. So, why again? Why does this appear twice? Why does Jesus do it twice? Is there something we're supposed to take away from this that's different than the 5,000?
I mean, the immediate kind of obvious thing that comes to mind is the need was there yet again.
The need was there yet again.
It was just there.
Yeah, absolutely. The need hasn't changed. Okay. What has happened in between the two? Miss Betty.
He had just healed the lame, the blind.
Yeah, he's healed a bunch of people. He's walked on the water, right? They've declared, right? The disciples declared on the boat, "You are Lord."
And the Canaanite woman had been healed.
And he's healed this Canaanite woman. And I think that's really huge, that piece of the context. I have read that this would have probably been a substantially more Gentile crowd than the feeding of the 5,000. The two happened not terribly far apart geographically. But I've read that this, and I wasn't there, so I can't tell you, and I'm working beyond the text, okay? Let me say that. I'm working beyond the text here. But my understanding is that this was a more Gentile crowd, right? He's gone from feeding the 5,000, he's gone deep into Gentile territory, right? What did we say? It was 100 miles to Tyre or something like that? Does anybody remember that? That was a couple, 3-4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. 100-mile hike into the city of Tyre to meet up with this woman with the demon-possessed daughter who had enough faith to say, "I'll take the crumbs." Walks the 100 miles back to Galilee. He's back in Galilee now. But he has got, like I said, from what I've read in commentary, a largely Gentile audience at this point.
But isn't it a faith-building lesson? I mean, so many times we see the wonders that God does in our lives, but yet we get to the next issue and we don't always bookmark.
Was last time a one and done?
Right.
Right? So that's a fair question for the disciples, right? They're standing there going, "Well, we did this once before. Was that a one and done? Was that strictly a Jewish thing? I think the Jewish Gentile question is really big in this. Again, I have to do some external reading for that, but I've read it more than once, right? That this audience, and you've got you could dive into the whole numerology thing, and I don't know about all that, right? They picked up 12 baskets last time, 7 baskets this time. 12 is Jewish, right? That's a Jewish thing, right? And we get 7 now. This is just completion, right? Go ahead, Doug.
Well, another insight that I was thinking about was the disciples didn't get it the first time, and I don't think they got it this time. And I think he's working on his disciples a little bit to help them understand, hey, you might have missed something when I did this before.
Right.
But it's not until, well, you'll get to it in a couple of Sunday school class, when Peter says, you are the Christ. Now all of a sudden. But maybe it took 2 of the same kind of miracles to...
Maybe, yeah. Certainly, we've seen some places where the disciples are slow learners. Not that I know anyone else who's like that. We all have that, right? And that, Betty was saying that, this is not just a one and done, right? This really is a thing, right? He really is who he says he is. He didn't just get lucky last time. He really does have the power to do this. And he has the power to do this over here with the Jewish people, and he's made this foray out to the Gentiles and comes back, and he's able to do this again with the Gentiles, and he's happy to do this again with the Gentiles. He has compassion on them just like he had compassion on the first group. We're getting pictures of the church. We're going to start the book of Acts today, next hour. Yeah, 2 seconds. We're going to start the book of Acts, and of course what we're going to see is this transition from this kind of Jewish movement to this all-encompassing, mostly Gentile church. As we work through that book, Jesus is teaching it here. Right? You're seeing him do the church, Big C church with Jew and Gentile brought from their respective places into this new thing here, the entire book of Ephesians there, in a sentence.
I think, kind of back up what Doug was saying in verse 33, the disciples came and asked what they should do. Why didn't they learn from last time? Just bring the baskets up and say, "Here, Lord, do your thing."
Yeah, why not? So you got a couple options, right? They're slow learners. You may have some questions in their mind about whether or not he's going to do this for this largely Gentile audience. Is he going to bring this same thing to them? Right? There may be some questions in their mind there. Over in the Gospel of John, shortly after the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus rebukes the crowd that all they want is something to eat. Right? That's happened in between here also. And I apologize, I don't have the reference on that. I didn't write it down. But shortly after the feeding of the 5,000 in the Gospel of John, this crowd comes around and he's like, you just want to get your stomachs filled. You're not really looking for what I have. And so maybe the disciples are looking back to that also, going, does he want to do this again? Right? They might not be sure. So there's a whole bunch of stuff wrapped up in this. Also that he can show us, once again, that he is still going to provide. And by the way, he's going to provide for everybody.
I've got a couple thoughts, and I'm not trying to change direction here, but one of the things that I think we need to remember is it's not 4,000 people. It's a lot more than 4,000 people.
Yes, it is.
And so I would say I would be willing to bet money there was at least 10,000 people there.
Probably, yeah.
Okay, when you look at the dynamics, you look at the town of Elkton, we have, 200 people here? You compare 20 times that as compared to 50 times that. That's a large group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing that I've checked up on, and I think I know what I'm talking about here, but back then they didn't have 3 squares a day. They would either have feast or famine. And it was not uncommon for them to go a day or so without a substantial meal. So put yourself in that shoes. If we go to Eugene and we want to stop on the way at McDonald's and get a hamburger, we can't. These people didn't have that.
They did.
They walked everywhere, and
And you might go without.
right, and the chances are they would. But here again, this guy is giving them all the food they could eat.
Yes.
That's a big deal, especially to people like me that like to eat. This is, I think we have the tendency to kind of live in our own little world. And when was the last time anybody in this room went hungry for 3 days? I can't think of a time. And when you add that to the equation, this really is an amazing miracle that took place.
And just for a logistics question, you're talking about feeding the city of Sutherland. Right? I mean, what's the population of Sutherland? Yeah, 9,000, 10,000 in that neighborhood. Yeah. So yeah. This is another one of those that if you see this dramatized, right? You see this dramatized with a few hundred people, and it's this nice little group, and everybody gets to eat. You're talking about a small town. Not even a small town. You're talking about a decent-sized small town rather than just Elkton, right? I could feed all of Elkton and bring me 200 people. I can make that. I've done it before, right? I can do that. 10,000? Yeah, I don't think so. Somebody had a hand up. Ron.
Well, I'm thinking of another picture here that I'm looking at. If they were primarily Gentiles, or even if they were just half and half, can you imagine how uncomfortable the disciples must have been? Because that was not their that was
Yeah, I'm
not
not
their
supposed to go hang out
upbringing.
with the Gentiles. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking there's a lot of teaching going on here now.
Teaching point there. Hey, Peter, you who down the line is going to say, Lord, I've, nothing unclean has ever entered my mouth, right? Out in chapter 10 of Acts. Peter, take this basket down. Take that group next. Well, right? That group's all Canaanite. It's an entire batch of Gentiles, right? They're over there by themselves because they want to be listening to Jesus, but the Jews don't want them to intermingle, right? So they're kind of over there by themselves. Because church is unfortunately pretty segregated. Yeah. Yeah. If it's a mixed crowd, who'd he feed first? Yeah. We don't know. Doesn't tell us. But at some point in time, I think Ron's right. At some point in time, if this is a largely Gentile crowd, right? These good Jewish boys have got to take a basket of chow and set it down and serve this Gentile. So a lesson was taught to them as well.
It's open to everyone.
Yes. Right. That's one of the biggest things you're taking out of this, right? Is that this is indeed open to everyone. We've made this run up to Tyre. We've healed this Gentile woman's daughter. Right? You've got everything going against you in that picture up there. Right? She's Gentile, she's a woman, and she's asking to have her daughter, another woman, healed. Right? She's second, third, fourth class here. And he's gone and he's done that, and he comes back and this crowd's here and he says, I have compassion on this entire crowd, not just this one. I have compassion on this entire crowd. I've been here healing them and healing them and healing them, and now it's time to feed them. It's time to provide this. So here you are, guys. Take this basket.
Hate to take up all the time here, but the woman that came to have Jesus heal her daughter, where was the father?
Who knows?
Yeah.
He may not have been anywhere. We can bump her down to 5th class.
Yeah.
Right?
So just a question I had.
Yeah. Yeah, she might have been one of them horrible, awful divorced people. Yeah. This is all a really big deal. He's turning stuff upside down on these folks. There's a reason that the Jewish leadership wanted him dead. He has taken every social norm and every power structure and just dumped it out in a big heap. You know, and I'm not much of a social justice theologian. I think it's silly. Okay? I mean, there's a train of thought there, guys, but and it goes. Some guys get way off in the weeds with it. But the fact is that Jesus did. Right? Jesus did a lot of this sort of stuff. Right? He broke down these barriers. Right? In the book of Ephesians, I wonder if I can find it. There we go. Chapter 2. So chapter 2, beginning at verse 11 in the book of Ephesians. Got your high sign back there, Doug. Thank you. Therefore, remember that formerly you, the Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by the so-called circumcision, which is performed in the flesh by human hands, remember that you were at that time separate from Christ, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who formerly were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he himself is our peace, who made both groups into one. And the NAS provides that, groups into, who made both one and broke down the barrier of the dividing wall by abolishing in his flesh the enmity which is the law. There was this division between Jew and Gentile that had existed for centuries, for millennia. And Paul tells us there in Ephesians that wall was broken down. And the two were made into one. Right? They were brought together in this new thing that is the church. And it includes them all. And so he's teaching that back in Matthew. And he teaches it over and over and over again. And it takes Peter a vision. Right? I'm going to jump into the book of Acts, right? Acts chapter 10. Cornelius, who is a Roman, right? He's a Gentile God-fearer, has a vision, and he says, "Man, go send for this guy Peter, because I want you to hear a message from him." And Peter has to have a vision himself in order to agree to go. Even though Jesus taught this and lived it and showed them these examples, Several years later, Peter still has to be given this vision from heaven 3 times. What God has declared clean, no longer consider unholy. And we need to approach the world the same way, right? That's the lesson, right? So we've got a minute left and we have a so what. That's it, is that we must look at the world through those eyes where it's not unholy. Sin is still sin, right? We still look them in the eye and say, that's sin. But where we understand that we all have this sin and we are brought together through the blood of Christ into this new thing that is the church. It has to be fast, Doug. 5 seconds.
You're going to get to this in finer detail when you get to 16. He does an entire commentary on the 5,000 and the 4,000.
He does.
He
do a
makes
commentary.
the distinction between the leaven of the Pharisees.
Yeah.
And so we'll get to that a little more deeper.
Yeah, there will be more coming in Matthew 16 also. Okay, we need to pray and shut this down, let everybody in, and we'll pick up 16 next week. Lord, thank you. Thank you so much that you have invited us into this thing that is your church, that you have provided for us. Lord, make us faithful to do the work, to take the basket to the guy that we don't want to take it to do the work of ministry. Make us faithful, Lord. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys.